News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
Hello, good evening and a warm welcome to Newsline. My guest this evening is Dr. Harini Amarasuriya from the NPP, of which the JVP is a component member of. Very good evening to Dr. Harini Amarasuriya and a warm welcome to Newsline.
Thank you. Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you. There are various things going on in Sri Lanka right now that are causing the public to be rather concerned, and I'm sure the opposition too. And one of those, of course, is that the public, from a public perspective, we have the recent ruling as well from the Supreme Court and so on. This is to do with the PAYE and the taxes, and it's only they're getting 9%, but they are subject to ordinarily the people who earn way less than this. For example, in the estate sector, their wages are not taxed, but their savings will be taxed. How fair do you find this to be?
Oh, I think it's very clear that it's extremely unfair that this government is proposing to tax people's savings, essentially. These are not savings that people have a choice about. The EPF fund is a compulsory saving. People don't have a choice about where this can be invested. So in essence, the governments are trustees of this savings. So they're trustees of this fund. And that's the basis on which this has been run for many years, that the government is a trustee of the pension funds that have been collected from the working people of this country, and that the government will take care of that fund with the interests of the people, the interests of the people who've contributed to the fund as their primary responsibility. And clearly the government is violating this trust, right? Because no other country in its domestic debt optimization efforts have only targeted superannuation funds. No other country has done this except Sri Lanka. So it's manifestly unfair and extremely unjust what the government is currently doing.
But Dr. Harini, don't you think that the government members, don't they realize that the majority of these people, well, they are all over 18 to start with, and therefore they are voters. Do they believe that they are going to rule forever in perpetuity, or are they patently aware that there has to be elections at some point?
Part of me thinks that they know that their time is limited. They know that they're not going to win an election in the future, and they're acting they're taking their revenge on people, right? Because this is a rejected government. This is a government that is deeply disliked, distrusted by the people, by the majority of people, by the vast majority of people. They're on their way out, and they know that. And they can't cope with the rejection. And they're beginning to treat the people as their enemy, right? So rather than actually what any sensible government or ruling party should do, to learn from their mistakes, to learn from what the people are trying to communicate, to learn from the people's sort of critique, they've turned ultra defensive, and they're on this sort of attacking mode against the very people who they're supposed to serve, right? So they essentially at this point don't seem to care that what they're doing is deepening this dislike among the public.
Or is there some sort of other almost sinister move to prolong the life of Parliament, and that in that knowledge they hardly give tuppence to the people, because they will try and, is it that they're trying to extend the term of this current parliament?
No, they can't do that. That is not possible. They can't do that. So, I mean, they're heading for a huge confrontation with the people if they are trying to do that. And that confrontation is not going to go well at all, right? So this is a government that is deeply disconnected with the people of this country. This is a government that has no idea about how people think and feel and what their daily experiences are. This is a government that is sort of very on a sort of, it has a very tunnel vision of what needs to happen, and that vision is deeply disconnected with the average citizen of this country, right? So it's partly that, and I think this government, like I said earlier, is deeply resentful of any kind of criticism and any kind of critique, right, or engagement with the people of this country, and is very arrogantly determined to pursue its own path, and in some senses it's sort of like, you know, they know this is their final moment, right, and they don't care. They really don't care what damage they are inflicting on the country and on the people of this country. They really don't care.
Well, I hear what you say, and you say that they can't do this, as in they can't prolong the life of Parliament. But one J.R. Jayawardena did that.
Yeah, one J.R. Jayawardena also had to win a or go to the people with a referendum even to do that, right? So either way, they would have to face the people at some point, whether through a referendum or through an election, right? And at this point, they are not in a position to expect an endorsement from the people of this country on any level. Certainly not to prolong the duration of the parliament. That's not going to happen.
Be that as it may, delusional or otherwise, or rational or irrational, the fact is that they haven't had the other elections yet, have they? No local government elections, no provincial council elections, and they are just carrying on, even though the money was voted. Even I think the Supreme Court said that they need to pass the money, but they can't say you have to have elections. But they went up to that point that they can, and they talked about the money. So, and yet,
you're correct. But this is different. And anyway, whatever the general election, a presidential election is due within the next 1 year, right? Within 10 to 12 months. I mean, by August, the presidential election has to be declared. There's no getting around that, right? Because unlike the local government elections even, which when the local government elections lapse because the election is not held, the president still has the power to appoint commissioners, right? But what happens when the duration of the presidency lapses? President can't re-elect himself or appoint himself. That's not possible. That's not constitutionally possible, right? The constitution is very, very clear. There is a time duration for the presidential period, and at the end of which the the seat cannot be held vacant even for an hour. The new president has to be in place, right? So elections must be held. And even with the local government election, for us, you know that the NPP has filed a case, and that case is due to be heard next month. So let's see. Let's see what the courts have to say about that. I mean, we can only wait and see what that decision might be. But whatever the decision of the court with regard to the local government election, and whatever the decision the government takes with regard to the local government election, certainly the same thing cannot be done with the presidential election. The Constitution is very clear that if they don't hold the presidential election, I mean, that's a completely different situation, right? then there won't be even a semblance of any constitutionality in our country left if that happens, and that will have to be dealt with in a separate way, and I don't think that's possible. So although people draw a lot of comparisons or parallels with J.R. Jayawardena, this is very different. The situation is quite different.
So what you're saying is that they may, whichever way, whatever route they want to go down, they're going to have to go to the people in any case.
Absolutely. Within the next year, they will have to go to the people. They may even have to hold the local government elections. They will certainly have to hold the presidential elections, and extending the period of the parliament or the presidency, extremely unlikely, but even if they want to do that, they will have to hold a referendum.
Even though they have a majority in parliament?
Yeah, that requires a referendum by the people. You cannot change the duration of the presidency without a referendum, and it's not just a simple majority. You need a two-thirds approval in parliament, which they currently don't have.
And if they wanted to go the other route to extend the term of parliament, would that be the same?
Well, parliamentary elections are not due till 2025, as you know, although the president has the power to dissolve parliament at any point now. The duration of the parliament extends 1 year after it's 2020 to 2025, right? So technically, a parliamentary election is not due until 2025. So there is no reason for them to extend, to talk about an extension when there's almost 2 years left of the lifetime of this parliament.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
දෙදහස් විසිතුන ගම්මැද්ද කඩිනම් ව්‍යාපෘති මාලාවෙන් සිදු කළ ව්‍යාපෘති වලින් කිහිපයක්. කන්තලේ සීනිපුර පිරිසිදු පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතියට මුල්ගල තැබීම. නුවරඑළිය සිල්ව කැන්ඩි පාසලේ සනීප ආරක්ෂක ව්‍යාපෘතිය. ඇහැටුවැව එරියාව මහින්ද විද්‍යාලය වටා අලිවැට ඉදි කිරීම. ගෙදරවැව පිරිසිදු පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය ජනතා අයිතියට පත් කිරීම. අනුරාධපුර තමුත්තේගම කුඩා බෙල්ලන් කඩවල පිරිසිදු පානීය ජල ව්‍යාපෘතියට මුල්ගල තැබීම.
ගම්මැද්ද රට නගන ජන පවුර.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
Let's wait and see, as they say. But in the meantime, another point of concern to a lot of people is this anti-terrorism bill. What do you find, and what does your party find deeply worrying about this?
As you know, it was gazetted over the weekend. So, and it's a fairly lengthy bill. So, from our initial observations, there's absolutely very little difference between what was gazetted previously and which caused a huge uproar. There's very little difference between that and what has been gazetted as a sort of a newer, better version, right? One of the principal problems with the bill that was gazetted, I think in March of this year, was the definition of terrorism, that it was very loose, that it was very broad, way too broad, so that many acts that could currently be dealt with under the existing law are now covered under terrorism, right, under terrorism law. So, and that this bill is clearly targeting people's protests, trade unions, the media, right? And that it's actually in contradiction, in violation of the constitutionally guaranteed right of freedom of expression, right? So this was the biggest critique against the original version of the bill, and the one that is gazetted over the weekend, I think on the 15th of September, there's no significant difference in how terrorism has been defined or interpreted, which leaves it, which is what is most dangerous about this act, because any kind of protest, any critique, any attempt to provide information about an act that can be seen as critical of the government can be defined as an act of terrorism, right? And that's really dangerous. So it's very clear that this government, if you take the fact that this government is gazetting this bill, the time of the UNHRC, the sessions are going on, IMF is in this country, right, doing their periodic review. Then the fact that this gazette should be seen alongside with a special essential services gazette, which was put out yesterday on Sunday, making the health sector, ports, all of this essential services. Plus they're talking about a broadcasting bill and a social media regulatory bill. All of this taken together, it's very clear where the government is heading, and that they're heading towards a clamp down on the freedom of expression, on the right of people to organize, to critique and to protest. And that is in anticipation clearly of the fact that people's growing anger and dissatisfaction with how the government is operating is going to spill over at some point very soon.
And all of this, does it augur well for you, for your party? Because you're sitting back and thinking, well, they are just hanging themselves even more. They put the noose around their neck is getting tighter.
Not really. I mean, in this sense, it's worrying in that we don't want to be in a situation that is clamping down on people, right? Just for the sake of an electoral victory. I mean, we can't let that happen, right? Because the election can come, but in the meantime, the damage that can be done to people, to people's organizations, to the media, that's going to have a long-lasting impact, right? So yes, you can sort of cynically sit back and say, let them hang themselves and we'll, reap the benefits at the election. But as a responsible political party, we also have a responsibility to make sure that there's minimal damage done to the people of this country and to the institutions that uphold democracy in this country while this government is in power as well, right? So we will be doing all that we can to minimize the damage and also to prevent the kind of instability in this country that the government can then turn to its own advantage also, right? Instability is not good for democracy. It's not good for anyone, right? And when a country goes into real turmoil, it can lead to the kind of authoritarian, kind of dictatorship, kind of rule, which will be extremely damaging.
I hear what you say, but I also want to ask you, several months ago, if you read the press and you listened to the TV and so on, there was this term, the JVP, Rellactino. Well, I suppose for the NPP as well, Rella. Where is this Rella? Where is this wave? Is it there? Am I missing it?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we were not very pleased with the depiction of the growing support for NPP as a ralla. A ralla suggests something fleeting, something not very stable, right? Like a trend, right? Yeah. But we think that the growing support for NPP is far more stable. It's not people just turning towards us in protest or turning towards us as a trend, but it's people who are actually recognizing the fact that we represent a difference, that we are offering a different solution to the problems that this country is facing. And it's a relationship that is built on trust, right? And it's a movement that is being supported by people's active involvement. And a lot of hard work has gone into building that, into building the NPP as a movement that is owned by the people of this country, right? So it's not a rally. I think first and foremost we don't want to describe it as a rally, right? It's something much more profound, much more stable, and it's representing a desire for real change in this country. And in that sense, I think that's only increasing. That's only increasing.
Okay. We live in I'll put it another way then. We live in a digital world. The people, the likes of Naviksha and Gunasekara and Harshana and everybody in the control room and in our building, in the media, they have something called digital. We live in this digital age. And therefore, is this growth in support and understanding of your party's ideas and what you stand for with the people and so on, is it organically grown? With apologies to Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his fertilizer, but I'm not talking that. I'm talking digital.
No, it is not something that is confined to the digital medium, if that's the question you're asking.
So I want to know whether the support is natural, whether it is organically coming up, or are you paying? We had a member of parliament the other day. He said that on social media you can pay 25 rupees per comment, and that sort of thing. That's what Mr. Rasamanikam was saying.
Trust me, the NPP doesn't have the money or the resources to be paying people 25 rupees per supportive comment, so that's not how it's happening. But certainly, I mean, the support on social media or in the digital space is not our only measure of the support that we see, right, or the support that we are experiencing. We are not saying that based simply on what's happening in the digital world. We are on a daily basis meeting people. We are on a daily basis organizing people, working with people, right? We are out. Our party members, the members of our party, the different organizations involved in our party are out every day talking to people, having meetings, having discussions, political discussions with them, mobilizing groups of people, mobilizing women, mobilizing young people, mobilizing farmers, fisher folk, the retired ex-service people, the whole range of groups that we are working with. And it's the support that we are getting at those meetings which is the real test or the real basis on which we are saying that there's growing support for people. I mean, this didn't happen accidentally for us. We've been working very, very hard. We've been working very, very hard on the ground. And we can see the results of that.
And I forgive me, but let's get it out of the way. What about this sort of negativity, especially amongst the older citizens and voters of our country, the negativity from the past? If my mum was alive, God bless her, she's gone now, but if she was around, and if I said to her, Mummy, what do you think? Shall I vote for the NPP? And she'd say, my God, they killed all those people. And, she'd go back to the background. How are you addressing that? Is that sort of disappearing in your talks with the people?
No, that's certainly a factor. And as you pointed out, it's also a factor, I would say, with an older generation that experienced, 88, 89 in particular, but also with a younger generation. The younger generation either have no information about what happened or have a very distorted idea about what happened, right? That as you know, for us, the JVP was not the only party responsible for the violence that happened or the deaths that happened. I mean, 60,000 deaths that took place the state, the government at that point is responsible for those deaths, right? So, so certainly that was a violent period all around. There were armed factions from the JVP, but also from the others, and certainly from the state as well, right? So the real picture is also distorted, right? But then there are people who, say my parents' generation as well, who remember the fear, who remember the instability, and who have concerns. And I think we will have to continue to explain, continue to talk to them that that's the past, and to look at what we are today, look at particularly the JVP since 88, 89, right? You know, and their renouncement of violence since then, right? So to judge us also not only based on 88, 89, but on what happened post 88, 89, right? So, I mean, that's a conversation that we will continue to have. But then I am also someone who grew up in 88, 89, right? And I remember that period as well. My education was also disrupted as a result of 88, 89, as many of my generation, as everybody in my generation. But if you look at NPP today, many of us who are in the NPP come from that generation, are children of that generation, right? Some of us who are in NPP today were opposed to the JVP at that point, right? But times are different. The JVP is different, the NPP is different.
Talking about time, I think Namik is telling me that we've got a couple of minutes to go, but let me get to another quick question, Harini. Talking to you as citizen Harini Amarasuriya, citizen of this country, does it deeply trouble you and does it bother you that Sri Lanka goes from one problem to another without so much as addressing these issues? I mean, if I start here, there are loads and loads of events that have cost the people money, cost our country opportunity to move ahead. We are in a situation where the government's declared ourselves bankrupt. We are not paying or servicing our foreign debt. And some people still say, oh, what a marvelous job it is because we've got no fuel queues, no gas queues. You know, they've forgotten that the eggs are now like double the price it used to be. Milk powder, 400 grams, somebody just told me is over 1,000 rupees, and so on. So does it bother you that successive governments in Sri Lanka, successive parliaments, lawmakers, don't appear to be focused on getting to the bottom of whatever issue is and getting it out of the way and taking action to not let it happen again?
Bothers me deeply. I mean, it's beyond bothering. It's deeply distressful, right? And I think that's what made me decide to do what I'm doing today, right? Because I think it's enough. Because what you're talking about, what you're describing is eminently preventable. That's the worst thing, right? All of this need not happen. All of this pain and suffering should not have been inflicted on our people, could have been prevented. That is what is most distressing. And I think that is why many of us are doing what we do, because we think this has to stop. I mean, you can't go on like this, and you can't go on excusing the rulers who seem not to care about the kind of distress, about the level of distress they are inflicting on people. I mean, it has to stop. It has to stop at some point.
Dr. Harini Amarasuriya from the NPP, thank you very much for being on Newsline. As I leave you today, perhaps Dr. Harini will agree with me that my last question is, it's more a case of recollections may vary, but there's no action. And hopefully this must stop. Thank you, Dr. Harini.
Thank you. Thank you, Faraz.
Thank you. And that's the way it was on Newsline this evening. Take care. Have a great evening as much as you can. And God bless you all.